how is significant when it comes to this particular interim order. The court says that, well, it cannot stay the entire order, but certain sections, especially with regard to non-Muslim members and also with regards to who can create a waqf or the practicing time period of the person who could create a waqf, that has been, those are the provisions that it has stayed. How important and what more can you tell us?
Well, that's right. See, I'll read out for viewers the five most important points with which the CGI today has made. The first point, he said that NEET 5 years as practicing Islam stands failed until rules are formed and it would lead to arbitrary exercise of powers. Now, this is the number one point. The second point the CGI makes that proviso Waqf property shall not be treated as Waqf property, but it says that serve making
Try to get Sabyasachi as first, and of course the first point that he in fact raised was about the person who could in fact declare a property as waqf, whether the Amendment Act had at least 5 years been prescribed to to the person who is said to have been practicing Islam to create a waqf property, but that is something that provision has been in fact stayed as of now. The provision also looks at the board members, and it says that as of now, not more than 3 non-Muslim board members would be part of the Waqf Trust, but it also says that reading section 9, it shouldn't be more than 4 is what the court has in fact said. This is the big story that we are tracking at the moment. Meanwhile, it also said that the CI also said that the collector cannot be permitted to adjudicate rights of personal citizens, and this will violate separation of powers. Now, he also went on to say, till adjudication happens by the tribunal, no third-party rights can be created against any parties. And the court also said that it upholds the entire aspect of the law, but it cannot in fact stay the entire law, and therefore only certain amendments it has in fact stayed within the aspect of it. So right now what we understand is that the entire Waqf Amendment Act has not been stayed, but certain provisions that have been held has been in fact been looked by the court, especially with who declares Waqf property and the practicing nature of that person, especially when that person is practicing Islam for 5 years was one of the criterion that had been given. So as of now, let us in fact see as to what further more details will be coming in with regard to this case. An important interim order that has in fact come as of now with regard to the Waqf case. Well, there is the Supreme Court has said that there is no case to ensure that the Act is completely stayed, but the Supreme Court has said that certain sections of the Waqf Act is something that they have in fact stayed as of now, and a crucial wording coming on this. Also, Sabyasachi is in fact joining us on the phone line. Sabyasachi was saying there are 5 important aspects that were raised in this Supreme Court interim order. Go ahead with it.
Well, that's right. See, the Supreme Court has stays provision that mandates disputed property would not be treated as Waqf unless the executive permits it after an inquiry. And the Supreme Court says that only certain provisions were directly challenged, and presumption is always in favor of the statute. The grant of stay is only in the rarest of rare category. Though the entire act was presumed to be challenged, only certain provisions were directly challenged, said the bench. And countering the Supreme Court, the observations that the parliamentary statute like the Waqf Amendment Bill 2025 enjoys a presumption of constitutionality. Petitioners had termed the new law a sweeping acquisition of Waqf properties owned by the Muslim community. And there are mixed reactions that we are certainly receiving from ground, where the opposition as well as people from the center. Now, clearly at this...
Well, that my colleague, in fact, telling out the provisions over there on what all has, in fact, been looked into the constitutionality of the law, something that they have been.
Number one, there is no stay on the amendments brought in by the central government headed by Maniya Narendra Modi ji. So there is no stay on the amendments. Only there is a interim order in favor of the petitioners regarding that they cannot be deprived of the work property without following the procedure laid down in the law, including the amended law. Third, that if any work has to be taken by the government, or the possession has to be taken back, that the procedure laid down in the Waqf Act, including the amendment of the Waqf, that procedure has to be followed by the tribunal as well as by the Honorable High Court. So after judgment of the tribunal only, that order can be given effect to. So that is the very clear order today by the Honorable Supreme Court. And very important order that those works are now has to be registered. Meaning thereby, those works which are not registered, they will not be treated as work property.
Sir, there is a contentious issue about practicing Muslim, that one has to be a practicing Muslim before he creates a waqf.
You see, if you remember that when this argument was going on, at that point of time, learned Solicitor General of India had given concession about this provision that the 5 years practice of Islam, the Honorable Court can decide this issue as per their own discretion. So accordingly, those who are practicing, who have not practiced Islam for 5 years, they cannot create work. That provision has been stated. आज जो माननीय सर्वोच्च न्यायालय ने अंतरिम राहत पे विचार करते हुए बहुत स्पष्ट आदेश दिया कि जो वक्फ अमेंडमेंट की जो प्रोविजंस है उसको स्टे नहीं किया गया है। दूसरा बात उन्होंने कहा है कि जो रजिस्ट्रेशन का जो मुद्दा है उस पर भी कोई स्टे नहीं है, यानी कि जो वक्फ रजिस्टर्ड नहीं है या जिसको रजिस्टर नहीं कराया जाएगा वो वक्फ प्रॉपर्टी ट्रीट नहीं होगा। तीसरी बात उन्होंने कहा कि जो नॉन मुस्लिम्स को मेंबर बनाने की बात कही है वक्फ बोर्ड में या अपीलेट ट्राइब्यूनल में, उसमें 3 की संख्या नॉन मुस्लिम्स की हो सकती है, उससे ज्यादा की संख्या नहीं हो सकती है। चौथी बात जो उन्होंने कहा है कि जो भी आप किसी को कहते हैं कि इनका वक्फ प्रॉपर्टी जायज नहीं है, कानून सम्मत नहीं है, तो जो प्रोसीजर प्रिस्क्राइब्ड है वक्फ एक्ट में इंक्लूडिंग अमेंडमेंट एक्ट, उसके हिसाब से ही आप उसको उस प्रॉपर्टी से बेदखल कर सकते हैं।
सर, वो जो डीएम को ज्यादा पावर दी गई थी राजस्व अधिकारी के बारे में जो कोर्ट ने कहा,
देखिए उस पर उन्होंने कहा कि जो सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर है, जो पावर न्यायपालिका को दिया गया है राइट डिसाइड करने के लिए, वो पावर एग्जीक्यूटिव नहीं कर सकता है एक्सरसाइज। इसीलिए ट्राइब्यूनल को और हाई कोर्ट को जो पावर दिया गया है उसी पावर के आधार पर उसे किया जाएगा और रेवेन्यू अथॉरिटी के पावर को स्टे किया गया है।
सर, आसान भाषा में कहें तो कोर्ट के फैसले के बाद क्या बदला है?
देखिए, कोर्ट के फैसले के बाद बदलाव बहुत मामूली है। बदलाव सिर्फ इतना है कि अगर किसी वक्फ यूजर के प्रॉपर्टी को सरकार लेना चाहती है तो उन्हें उस प्रक्रिया से गुजरना होगा। पहले क्या था कि डिस्ट्रिक्ट मजिस्ट्रेट से रिपोर्ट लेकर के उनको उनके प्रॉपर्टी से हटाया जा सकता था, लेकिन अब उनको अपीलेट ट्राइब्यूनल और फिर कोर्ट का सहारा लेकर के ही हटाया जा सकता है। यानी कि थोड़ा समय लगेगा, लेकिन न्याय का जो पहले बिल्कुल दरवाजा बंद था उस दरवाजे को खोल दिया गया है।
All right, you're watching News9 with me, Neha Ban. Supreme Court has stayed few provisions of the Waqf Amendment Act 2025. This is as per the SE number of non-Muslims in state Waqf boards and central Waqf councils cannot exceed 3. In fact, the Supreme Court there has stayed key provisions of the Waqf Amendment Act 2025. One provision requires a person to be a practitioner of Islam for 5 years before creating a Waqf. This has now been put on hold until state governments frame clear rules to define who qualifies as a practitioner. Additionally, the court has also stated the clause that allows a government-designated officer to resolve disputes about whether Waqf properties encroach on government land. Now, these interim orders come as the court continues to examine the broader constitutional validity of the law, which expands, in fact, government oversight of Waqf properties. The centre defends the law as constitutional, while petitioners argue it undermines traditional Waqf governance. Let me, in fact, quickly go across to my colleague Sabya Sachi. He continues to be with us. He's joining us live from Supreme Court. Sabya, you know, the Supreme Court has refused to stay the Waqf Amendment Act in its entirety. Break it down for us. What are the provisions that have been stayed and what's, stayed and what's still in force?
Well, see, the rule requiring 5 years of practicing Islam for certain matters cannot work unless proper rules are framed. Without rules, it would allow arbitrary use of power that is being stayed by the Supreme Court, and the property cannot automatically be treated as Waqf property just because of this proviso. That also has been stayed, and allowing a revenue officer, collector to decide ownership right to property interferes. That has been stayed, and a Waqf cannot have more than 4 non-Muslim members. That has also been stayed, and ex-officio officer must compulsory be a Muslim. That particular provision has also been stayed by the Supreme Court.
Sabya, continue to stay with us. In fact, let me also...